Hello, everyone. Welcome to Drumfills Cafe. My name is Denis, and welcome to this other episode, or probably my last episode of this 7th season. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. As usual, I'll invite you to check out the Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram pages of Drumfills Cafe, to do a like and share those pages with your friends. Of course, I invite you to check out drumfillscafe.com, the main website for Drumfills Cafe, to check out about all the past seasons and what happened during this 7th season. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. Well, I have a kind of a special guest for me personally. My guest tonight has been a Toronto-based professional drummer for 4 decades, and he is best known for his work with one of Canada's best bands, Blue Rodeo, which has sold in excess of 4 million records and an unprecedented 11 Juno Awards. Congratulations. He's also the main songwriter for his own project, The Swallows, and he continues to play with a variety of artists, such as Ian Blurton's Future Now. So please welcome Mr. Mr. Glenn Milchem. Sorry, I had to screw it up somewhere.
That's okay. It's a weird name. It's rarely pronounced correctly. Glenn Milchem. I should have got a stage name when I still had the chance. It's too late now. Glenn Smith.
Yeah, exactly. Or just Glenn.
Just Glenn. It's not bad.
Hello, Glenn. Nice to meet you.
Hi. Nice to see you, Denis. I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. First things first, you very generously invited me to see a show in my hometown in Montreal last Friday, and honestly blew me away because, for one thing, it wasn't Blue Rodeo music. It was very garage, heavy stuff, and you were playing the crap out of you, that small little kit you were playing, doing some double bass drumming and that sort of thing. So very cool. Is that something is that a style that's always been interest to you?
I like all kinds of music, and I mean, before I played in Blue Rodeo, I tended to, a lot of the bands I played in were kind of a more aggressive style of music, not like everything. I started playing in Toronto in the early 80s, and at that time there was a lot of post-punk music happening. So some of the first bands I played in were bands like a band called Vital Signs, and I was in a band called Groovy Religion, and another band called The Garbage Men, and a band called White Noise. And some of these bands were kind of like White Noise and The Garbage Men were a little funk based, with White Noise had sort of an Ornette Coleman jazz influence. The Garbage Men were kind of like a minimalist funk band. And Groovy Religion I would say were kind of goth punk, and Vital Signs were kind of a post-punk funk band, influenced by bands like Gang of Four and Simple Minds. And then from there, I started playing all kinds of different music, but I was always playing a diverse types of music. But when Blue Rodeo got popular in the mid to late 80s in Toronto, there was suddenly a kind of a sea change in the music in Toronto, and all these roots bands came up. Like there was always roots music in Toronto, like sort of country influenced roots music, but that after Blue Rodeo's success, suddenly there were tons of bands like that. So I joined this singer-songwriter named Andrew Cash, who was signed to Island Records at the time. This would have been in 1988. Right.
And it's funny, I went back and I listened to that, what is it, Boomtown song?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
And I remember that song. It was in my brain somewhere. It's interesting.
He got a lot of airplay in the late 80s. And we did some touring and stuff across Canada and in Europe with Melissa Etheridge, but I basically had to educate myself in the genre of roots music, and listening to the band. I had to, okay, how does Lee Von Helm play? Because before that I was much more
Very
interested in
laid
how the
back.
drummer. Yeah, I was more interested in how the drummer from Gang of Four played, or and that sort of thing. Or I was really into jazz when I was younger. Just wanting to be a professional drummer, I it forced me to learn a lot of genres,
Mhm.
and so then I happened to end up in Blue Rodeo, actually partly because they saw me playing with Andrew Cash, and they knew me from the other bands I'd played in previously, but when they saw me play with Andrew Cash, they were like, "Hey, this guy can play our kind of music," and they happened to be looking for a drummer, so they gave me a call, and that's how
Okay.
I ended up in Blue Rodeo. But
Rodeo.
it's
Okay.
not roots music is not sort of where I come from. It's something I
Okay.
adapted to. But people
Okay.
do think of me as like, oh, Glenn, yeah, that guy, he's like a country rock drummer. It's like, well, yeah, but that's one of the things I do. It's not everything I do.
Well, after seeing you play last Friday, no, exactly. I know that you have this other styles in you, but also
Mm.
even in Blue Rodeo, and I would talk about this a bit later. But even Blue Rodeo, I always thought you were, it had those moments of spice, so those moments of a little bit more fill here, a little bit more excitement, a little bit more, not
Yeah.
aggression, but a little bit more, just there's a presence there in the drums compared to say like the first two records, which is
Right.
more very simple fills, very, very simple playing sort of thing. And that's, I remember like, and we're going to jump around here, but I remember seeing you for the first time in 2003, as I related to this to you last Friday at Blues Fest
Right.
in Ottawa.
Right.
And I remember seeing that show, and I was like, wow, the drummer's really having fun and playing these little fills and adding these little spices and everything. It really brought, more interest to the music, especially for a drummer, of course.
Oh, that's great.
So
That's nice to hear.
yeah, so that's why I was so interested if sort of that sort of rock genre was something that you were part of. But as you say, yeah, that's where you come from, basically, is what you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, very
I
interesting.
come from, I studied jazz too. I've never really played in a proper jazz band, but I studied jazz when I was a kid, and my dad was a huge jazz fan. So I'd say,
Okay.
though I am not a proper jazz drummer, but my playing is jazz influenced, and I think some of that goes into rodeo as well.
Hmm.
With that band, the template for that band, like you say, the first two records, the drumming is relatively simple, but that was
Hmm.
the drummer Cleve Anderson, who was great with rodeo, and but he had a certain style. And I remember when I joined the band, they were kind of like, yeah, you know, our drumming's, they kind of said to me, we like a lot of simple single stroke roll fills and things like that.
Hmm.
And right away I was like, okay, I'll do that, and then I'm going to figure out how to squeeze in my thing. And since then, it's been 30 years of trying to figure out how to squeeze in my thing and keep them happy at the same time.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
well, you've been doing a great job, honestly, and we'll go through some of
Thank
the
you.
tracks just to discuss some of the stuff. But before we continue with Blue Rodeo, I just want to do a bit of a to continue with Ian Blurton. I mean, you were playing double bass stuff on
Mm-hmm.
the record Second Skin. If I recommend people to check out the track Second Skin, I mean, you're really going at it right there. You're blowing,
Yeah.
left and right, but it fits the music. That's the thing. It really fits the music, and I really invite people to check it out. And talk to me about making that record, because that's a record that was done not so long ago.
Yeah, we recorded that record. I guess it was a few years ago now. It was
Oh, really?
2019, I
Okay.
think we recorded. Well,
Okay, it's been
everything
years.
kind of got held up by the pandemic and all that.
Right.
But that record, uh, yeah, it's Second Skin by Ian Blurton's Future Now, and it was recorded at the National Music Center in Calgary.
Okay.
Ian got accepted as a guest artist there, so we went there for 5 days to make the record. And much of that record is us playing. Well, we had to do all the thing about that record is we actually recorded how many songs? I don't know, 18 songs in that
Okay.
session. We
Okay.
had to do it all in 2 days. We had two
Really?
days to get the bass and drums down, because the first day was just trying to get sounds. And
Yeah.
we had a very complicated setup. We were actually recording through the Rolling Stones mobile recording truck, which is what Exile on Main Street was recorded on. Much of
Wow.
Led Zeppelin 4 was recorded on that. Deep Purple
Wow.
Machine Head, like all these insane classic albums were recorded on this mobile truck, and they happened to have it at the National Music Center in Calgary. But the studio we were in was up on the second floor, and the truck was on the main floor. So it was just the process of getting sounds and everything, and going and checking everything out was kind of complicated. So the first day was sort of given over to technical stuff. So, to be honest, I wish we had a little more time making that record. Like when you talk about that track Second Skin, I mean, there's a few like epic songs on that album that are 7 or 8 minutes long and have all these time changes, and I'm happy with how that track turned out. But I when I listen to it, I sort of think like, oh, I wish we had another day to kind of. I hear things that I would have done a little differently, but it was done pretty quickly, that record, and under a bit of duress, given our time constraints and that we were, in another province. But we just plowed hard, did really long days and got it done, and it was a lot of fun, and I'm really proud of that record. I'm impressed by that record, not by my own work, but just all the work that Ian Blurton put into writing, and he engineered. We did do a couple of tracks at his studio in Toronto. He's also a very good engineer. He's a great producer and mixer himself. So just the work he put into that writing and arranging that, and is quite something. That record is pretty amazing.
So, given the time constraints you had, was it a case of you coming in and just doing the drums and everything was sort of prearranged, or was there a moment?
Everything was prearranged, but it was the four of us recording together in the room and trying to keep as much as possible. So I think all the bass and drums were kept, and maybe I don't know if they kept any of the guitars or not, but I imagine a lot of the guitars were redone. But it was basically to get the bed tracks,
Cool. Well, I mean, your drums sound huge on that record. Is it big drums you're playing? Is it a recording way that made them so huge? So
I think some of that is the mix. It was mixed by this guy Daryl Smith, who's an old friend of ours, who's a fantastic recording engineer and mixer. So some of the credit has to go to Daryl. They're not huge drums. It's a 22. I was playing same size kit that I was playing when you saw me at Turbo House on Friday night, and so it's a 22-inch kick, a 13-inch rack tom, a 16-inch floor tom. That's it. Okay. Big cymbals. I had like 19 and 20-inch crashes, 22-inch ride, 15-inch hats. The cymbals are big. The drums are kind of average size. Okay. But I tune them low. They're tuned low, and kind of open,
Okay. Yeah. So they resonate a lot more, basically. Yeah. There's not a dead sort of a sound to it. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, like they are.
Very, very cool. Well, I invite people to check out our record. It's on the web. I think it was Bandcamp or something like this. That I'll put a link at the.
Yeah, it's on all the streaming platforms, and it's called Second Skin by Ian Blurton's Future Now. And it's all. If you see it in a record store and you're interested, I highly recommend the vinyl. The vinyl sounds amazing.
Very cool. Quickly on that show, you had some technical difficulties. We all have them. You impressed me because you sort of something happened with your pedal and you had to switch pedal. And I must admit, I've done hundreds and hundreds of gigs. I've never brought a second pedal, but you did.
Right. Well, I brought a second double pedal. Yeah, because I play double pedals in that band. Yeah, thanks. Well, I am a professional, so I'm supposed to behave in a professional manner. But I was actually having problems with my main double pedal set, so I thought I better bring my old double pedals just in case. And sure enough, third song in, the pedal broke, and so I had to stop the set and get my spare pair, which luckily I had with me.
Yeah, and you did beautifully. It just took about 5 minutes, and the show continued. So
thanks. Yeah, 5 minutes while the singer was giving me a hard time, I'd like to point out.
On the microphone. That's called banter. That's called band banter, basically.
Yeah.
Let's go back just a bit. You said basically that your parents were fans of jazz and everything. I was wondering, did you have any like formal training? Is there some sort of drum corps or rudimental stuff in your background? Because it seems to be a lot of your drumming, and I don't know if that I'm depicting something that's not there or.
Oh, well, certainly rudiments are a big part of my drumming. And actually, during the pandemic, one of the things I did was like, okay, I'm going to use this time to get my rudiments together and learn new rudiments. And that's one of the fascinating things. One of the cool things about the internet too is you can just sort of go like, I'm going to look up rudiments, and now there's all these hybrid rudiments out there that are really interesting. Right. So I've been trying to learn some of those things like flam fives, and I don't know what's the other weird hybrid things that I didn't cheeses. Like that's new to me, like playing cheeses, and so I do practice rudiments, and I sort of have a renewed interest in rudiments. Over the last few years, but the only formal training I had was I took about 3 years of private drum lessons from the ages of 12 to 15. Yeah. And I wish I'd studied more. It never occurred to me to go to music school. I thought if I was ever going to have any kind of post-secondary education, I would probably have studied English. But I ended up not going to university at all after high school. I was just like, I'm going to go play in bands. And so that was, other than my 3 years of private lessons, my education has been in clubs and bars and concert halls,
Cool. Well, no, I was just curious because I hear flams in your fills. I hear like sort of double stroke rolls with singles mixed up together, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, and even at the show last Friday, you were doing that sort of stuff. So I was just wondering if that's something that was part of your growing up or practicing regimen, if you will, the whole rudiment stuff, if you will.
It was growing up, but I learned like the 26 essential rudiments, and and then I think for a long time I just coasted on, the rudiments everybody knows, your paradiddles, double paradiddles, and, double strokes, 5-stroke rolls, and 7-stroke rolls, and what have you. But yeah, I'd say in the last few years, I definitely became more interested in expanding my rudimental knowledge and practicing that. And I've definitely been applying that. Future Now is definitely a band where you could apply that stuff, because right. There's so much going on, and also it's rare in that music where there's a point where you go like, you shouldn't do too many fills here, like, most of it's like do lots of fills all the time, so there's all these opportunities to try things out, and to apply rudiments and that sort of thing. There's actually a lot of opportunities for that in that music, so it's great.
Yeah, it does have that sort of context where pretty much anyone can go off and is supported by the band, if you will.
Yeah,
that sort of context is what I observed and witnessed on that show. So cool. Well, moving right away to Blue Rodeo. So yes, you mentioned basically that Jim had called you to audition and be part of the band. Talk to me about entering something like that. I mean, they were already popular back then, back in the early 90s. Talk to me about, as you say, that transition from heavy stuff to that sort of more Blue Rodeo stuff and entering that sort of situation.
Right. Well, like I say, I was playing with Andrew Cash. It was actually Andrew Cash who called me. I had played with Andrew. This would have been late 91. And I started playing with Andrew in 88. So I've been with him for a few years, but he was kind of in between record deals, I think. So he was sort of in a bit of a downtime in his career, and Jim happened to call him and say, hey, would you mind if we ask Glenn to audition, because we need a new drummer. And so it was Andrew that called me and said, hey, Glenn, I think your ship has come in, because Jim Cuddy just called me and asked if it would be cool if you auditioned for Blue Rodeo. So that was very exciting for me. It was actually, at the time, because Andrew had sort of wound down his operation temporarily. And I had been playing with I'd actually been playing with a kind of pop metal band called Andy Curran and Soho 69. And I had just left that band. I toured with them through 1990. And I had a lot of fun with them. I did one record with Andy Curran called No Tattoos. So that was kind of like, I would compare that band to sort of Aerosmith type metal. And so it was like a hair band. We all had long hair. With,
I mean, it was the times.
And,
it was the times.
Yeah. So, but you know, that music was, I really enjoyed it, but it was a little one-dimensional for me. And also Nirvana hit in 1991, and it was pretty obvious that kind of music, you know, it was the day of hair bands was kind of done. Like, you know, like Nirvana just killed them all off, right? They all went and cut their hair and started, everybody changed their look, and it was just sort of the writing on the wall that kind of music wasn't gonna sustain much longer. So I felt so I had left that band, and I was kind of in between gigs, and then that month I got a call from Ian Blurton, who I still presently play with, but he had a band then called Change of Heart, and he asked me if I would record this album, this double record they were working on called Smile, which ended up being a pretty important record in terms of Canadian independent bands. At least at the time, it was an influential record. And then like a week later, I got this call from Jim. So in the first week of January, or first 2 weeks or week or two of January 1991, I recorded Lost Together with Blue Rodeo, and I recorded Smile with Change of Heart. And that was kind of a big change, a big change for me. That was kind of the beginning of a new era in my life. And musically, the transition, like I say, had been playing with Andrew Cash, who was not musically that different from Blue Rodeo. So it wasn't like I went in there going like, how do you play this stuff? But I did have to sort of consciously simplify what I was doing. And but I fit in with them pretty quickly, I have recordings, I have cassette recordings of our first rehearsals, and
cool.
And it sounded like a band right away,
Right away.
And
sort of meshed up. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. And it was interesting too, because they were in kind of disarray at that point. Their keyboard player, Bobby Wiseman, the original keyboard player, was on his way out, and he was noticeably not really happy with being in the band. So there were changes afoot, and that was kind of apparent. But for me, it was an amazing thing to get to go and record with these guys in a Manta, beautiful old studio in Toronto that no longer exists, called Manta, which was like a classic, old school studio with a huge room that you could record an orchestra in.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So it was a great experience, and then from there, I there was, especially live, I had to learn how to adapt, because I was we were talking about me playing double pedals with Future Now. When I joined Blue Rodeo, I played double pedals all the time with everybody, even Andrew Cash. I was like, I'm gonna throw this in where, I was kind of like, I'm gonna throw this in wherever I can. There's an Andrew Cash song on Boomtown called "What Am I Gonna Do with These Hands," and there's double kick on the outro. I managed to squeeze it in, and the producer let it happen. But and then for the first year or so I was in Blue Rodeo, I used double pedal. There's even some double pedal on the album Lost Together. There's a couple of songs where at the end there's like a scrub, like and I got some double kick. I squeezed in some double kick there. But probably the first year live, I played double kick with Blue Rodeo, and there's some live recordings of me doing that, and it just sounds so wrong. Like, it's just like, the Blue Rodeo got the drummer from Megadeth for this show. It just sounds So after about a year or so, I realized I think I should stop playing double pedal in this band because I'm making an aesthetic mistake here, and
Right.
so I kind of put the double pedals away until I started playing with Ian again. So
Okay, interesting.
yeah,
Interesting.
but there was.
I'm gonna try to find those.
Yeah, but there was some adapting to be done, and to be honest, I still am kind of adapting to Blue Rodeo
Really,
in
after
a
all
lot
these
of ways.
years, really.
I
Okay,
mean,
it's
I'm
been
still trying to after all these years, I'm still trying to figure out how to play in that band. Honestly, it's a never-ending thing because it always evolves, and things have
mm,
happened like. One of our singers, Greg Keeler, he's diabetic, and he got
right,
really
right.
bad tinnitus. And
Hmm.
so when he got really bad tinnitus, it got to the point where he wasn't sure if he could continue, and we had to
Hmm.
all figure out how to drastically reduce our stage volume, which is
Okay.
why when I play with Blue Rodeo, I don't play with regular drumsticks. I'll show you what I play with. Hang on.
Yeah, I think I know, but go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. There are uh, these rods here that are they're a lot like hot
Right,
rods, but they have
right.
thicker dowels. These ones are all busted up, but they're made for me by this company called Headhunters. Let's see if you can.
We've
Here's
had
my.
we've had the headhunters on the show exactly,
Oh,
and
okay,
they've
Dave Rundle. Okay, look,
explained it.
it's my
Yeah,
signature stick.
very
Anyway,
nice. Yeah.
so yeah, Dave Rundle of Headhunters makes these for me. They're called Rodeo Riders. They're kind of an adaptation of some other rods he makes. But the thing about them is they have a thicker dowel,
Yeah,
so
you
you can
explained that.
really you can hear the ride cymbal nice
Hmm.
and clear. And
Hmm.
but they're a little quieter than sticks, and so I use these with rodeo and brushes, and I also have I'm in the far back corner of stage right, as far away from Greg as possible, and I have
Hmm.
plexiglass around the
I was
kit,
about to say, yeah, yeah,
and
exactly.
all the amplifiers on stage, the speakers are in isolation boxes off stage, and everybody's listening to themselves either through in-ears or through monitor devices.
Really interesting.
So yeah,
Okay. Okay.
that's what we had. We did that almost 15 years ago now, just to be able to continue.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Just
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, like I say, it's a constant process of adaptation with that band.
Hmm.
You know.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And but it doesn't hinder your playing. It doesn't really hinder your creativity, if you will. It's just more of a, is it a volume issue, or is it more of a, I'd like to play this, and then you have to sort of negotiate? How, explain a bit on more detail
Yeah,
if you
I'd
want.
say it is a volume issue, but yes, there is some of those things that, like for instance, with these, it's almost impossible to do a buzz roll or a press roll.
Right. Right.
So that's like part of my vocabulary has been removed.
Hmm. Hmm.
You can, like, even just to do sort of like a drag, just to go like brrr, and with
Right.
one
Right. Right.
hand or something. These don't really bounce. They
Right.
bounce a
Right.
little bit, but not much. So everything is in the fingers and the wrists. You don't get to do buzz rolls. There is a limitation that comes with having to do this,
Hmm.
and so you just, like I say, part of my language is being taken away, and I have to figure out how to say what I got to say without that. You can't do cross stick with these, so I always have, sometimes I'll play with one stick right on my left hand because, like, oh, this song has, cross stick on the snare, like when we do a song like Try.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm. Do you
I
replace that
play.
with some sort of block, or?
I just pick up a stick for that one, but I just have a stick in
Oh,
my right hand and one of these in my left hand. I'd
I
rather
see.
a
I
stick
see. I
in my
see.
left hand and one of these in my right hand. So,
Yeah. Right.
things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, interesting. I sort of read up on that somewhere, that he had that
Uh,
issue, but I wasn't sure
mhm.
it had to change that much. I thought one of the things he had to do is to hire another guitar player for that reason.
Yeah. Hmm.
But it's interesting what you
Colin
have to say
Fritz. Yeah.
about that. Interesting, and it's interesting,
Hmm.
that adaptation you have to do. It's a good, again, very professional, very interesting.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's professional. Yeah. It's like if I want to keep my gig,
Well, I mean,
I have to adapt. That's really what it came down to. And but as something that Greg pointed out, it made us a better band because
okay,
it made us more dynamic, and actually we sound way better live, because we used to be, when I first joined, we were a loud band, even though we were just, Blue Rodeo, this nice roots band. It was like there were like so many Vox amps on stage, just cranked. I was playing as I was can be a very loud drummer, and I was playing as loud as I wanted to, and we were super loud, and so and we would play places like Massey Hall in Toronto, which is like an old hall designed for choirs and orchestras, and we would not sound good there because we would be too loud. And now we play Massey Hall and we sound fantastic because our stage volume is so controlled. So it's just, it has actually made us a better band. It's there's something to be said for when you're a band, and if you're going to survive as a band, you are going to face adversity at times. Like, things are going to come up that are either going to make your band break up or continue. And if you can manage to continue, you will probably be a better band for overcoming whatever obstacles.
Right. Well, I mean, I've always said it, bands are marriages, and you gotta, you gotta communicate, you gotta, if somebody's got something to say, you gotta listen, you gotta adapt. It's a constant thing. It's a constant living thing in itself. It's interesting.
It is, and I find band politics and band relationships really fascinate me, because I am in a lot of bands, and I've been in a lot of bands, and it is. But I'm a big believer in bands staying together, especially if you have an audience, any kind of audience. If you have a consistent audience, you are incredibly lucky, because 98% of the bands out there don't have an audience. Like, they just don't. But if you have a band where it's like every time we play 200 people show up, it's like, don't break up. Do not break up, because like, you don't know how lucky you are. You can even do that. Or if you can eke out a living in your band, don't break up, because you are so unbelievably lucky. Work out your shit, whatever your problems are. How you don't like this guy, work it out, because you just think like, I'm going to go off and do my solo thing, or I'm going to go off with some of that. No, it won't happen for you again. It's probably, you think you can just go do this with someone else. You probably aren't going to. It's probably going to fail, because it's incredibly rare to have an audience, or to be able to even just make a decent living. And if you get there, hold on to it for dear life and work out all your problems and keep moving forward, because you're very lucky.
Wise words. Well, let's go through some of the tracks. There's a couple of tracks I want to geek out with you, if you don't mind.
Let's geek out.
Of course. So, Lost Together, first record you did. There's a couple of interesting things that you do on that record, especially the song itself, Lost Together, at the beginning. Very Ringo-esque. Would Ringo be an influence? The
absolutely
boom sort of thing. That you're doing
I mean, that's Greg's song, and it's interesting. He told me what he wanted, that he wanted those kind of Ringo fills, except he didn't necessarily use. I think Ringo was in there. Obviously, you're thinking Day in the Life, those drum fills, and I read the news today. Oh boy, did it. Whatever those, those sort of Ringo fills that are in. Right. So I was thinking of those, but Greg actually played me a record by this duo named Dillard and Clark, which were Gene Clark from the Byrds, and I forget Dillard's first name, but this is Dillard and Clark. I think it's something that I think it's called the Fantastic Expedition of Dillard and Clark, or something like that. It's a classic early country rock record, and the first song on it, I forget what it's called, Out on the Side or something. But the very first song on that record has these drum fills. And the first song on the record, The Fantastic Expedition of Dillard and Clark, has the drum fills that were kind of the template for the Lost Together fills. But I'd have to say I was probably thinking more Ringo than that record. And so
Cool.
yeah, there's
Cool.
definitely Ringo on that
Some
song for
special
sure.
stuff.
Yeah.
Apologies for the cut.
No worries.
But we'll definitely check that record out. I'm curious. But yeah, there's a couple of things like that. Restless on that record is good rocking song. I mean, there's a little solo at the end you're doing as well. I mean, you're really letting go of that one. Just that whole record is very interesting. And to me, interesting. I remember, I went back during the week to prep for this. And I remember the song Flying. And Flying, you're doing these kind of, I think it's a flam between the snare and the tom floor. You're doing these kind of things in between the verses and the chorus. All this kind of filling stuff. I don't know if you still do that today, but that was, to me, I remember that song, and I remember thinking, wow, I mean, that drummer's, really, I mean, he's really good, and it fits the song. And I remember seeing that when I was a kid.
Oh, that's cool. You know what? I haven't heard that song in years, so I can't really that's not one that we have played in years. So I haven't heard it, so I can't really speak to the fills you're talking about. The interesting thing about that song was that I recorded that. There was already a drum track on that song with the previous drummer, Mark French, and they recorded it, but they wanted me to redo the drums, so I redid the drums, playing to all the all the other instruments, like the vocals, everything had already been recorded, and I was just replacing the drum track. And so that was interesting. But then that's what I remember about that song. I can't tell you much else.
Anyways, I just remember watching. I mean, I'm from the Much Music years, so I remember seeing that video and going, "Oh wow, that's really cool." He's really really playing that song. He's giving
cool. That's great to know that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was a good memory, and as I listened to it again, I think a couple of days ago, I was like, "Oh yes, a good song." I remember that. So.
Right.
Moving on to I'm not going to do every album, of course, but I'm just picking and choosing here and there. 5 Days in July, which has a bit more of a brushwork, I think. This very brush oriented sort of drumming.
Yeah.
And was that a conscious thing, or is that something? How do you approach? Okay, this record needs more brush. This song needs more brush. How do you get to that point where that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to record this way and all that stuff? How do you get to that?
When we recorded that record, initially the idea was that it was going to be an acoustic EP. And I remember Jim coming to me and saying, "Okay, we're going to do this acoustic EP, and we just want you to play brushes on it." And I was kind of like, "Nah," because especially at the time I was really into like rock drums, and I was like, "Okay, I guess we'll do that." And then we're going to make a proper rock album, right? Because and but it ended up being an acoustic album, and we were it was entirely recorded. Not entirely. There were some overdubs later on a few songs, but most of that record is live off the floor. Like I would say 90% of that record is live off the floor with all of us in Greg Keeler's living room.
Okay. Wow.
And so it's funny, I just saw a picture of that setup this morning, and there's like a quilt over the bass drum. I think that's what they used. There was, they literally, it was kind of it was recorded with a mobile unit, the Comfort Sound mobile truck, with this by the guy that owns it, Doug McClelland, who still records with that truck, or he has a new truck, but he's still doing mobile recording. And so it was, we would have mic stands, like boom stands, set up kind of in an upside down L shape with like quilts draped over them to sort of isolate the instruments a bit. But that was all there is. So really, out of necessity, I had to play quietly, because there was an upright piano and acoustic guitars, and the vocals are being recorded in the same room. So yeah, it was essential. I played a lot of blastics actually on that record. I played brushes and blastics, and I think
is blastics on the classic one, Hasn't Hit Me Yet. Is that what you're playing on that?
Blastics is actually rods. I mean, Hasn't Hit Me Yet is actually rods, hot rods. Okay. Blastics I used blastics, I think, on 5 Days in May. as opposed to brushes. But then other songs I used brushes. So but there's no sticks on that record at all, and which was the concept of the album. It was basically this is an acoustic record, all of us in a room together, playing quietly, and I looked at it as like, okay, we're gonna do this temporary thing, and then we're going back to what we do best, which is rocking out. And but it actually it changed the band. It changed the sound of the band. And if anything, and suddenly that was like 50% of what we were, was this sort of quieter side, which as I get older, especially as I've gotten older, I appreciate more and more. Just because, with my hearing and stuff, it's like, yeah, I want to play quiet music. That was kind of the irony when Ian Blurton called me to join Future Now. I was thinking like, I need to play quieter music now. And then Ian's like, do you want to join my metal thing? And I was like, okay, because anything Ian wants to do, I will do.
Sure.
So
yeah, you were saying that at the show that you guys have a chemistry together, and it kind of shows.
I have tremendous respect for Ian, as I do. There were several people that I've known over the years that I would do anything they asked, and he's definitely one of them. Maybe not several, but there's a few, and he's one of them. And but I do love that Blue Rodeo has this quieter side, and especially given the volume limitations we've been confronted with over the last decade or so, that served us really well. It's beautiful to play quietly. Like, I love quiet music. I love really loud music too, but
Well, it's an interesting challenge in itself, to get to the right dynamic with the whole band.
Yeah.
I mean, I've played just a little quick story, but I've played little places called the elbow room, and it's literally the elbow room because you can't move your elbows. If I move just like do the molar thing, I'm hitting a wall or something. So it was that challenge of keeping it at a right dynamic, and it's an interesting place because people are right in front of you. So if you play too loudly, if I hit my crash, the whole band disappears, sort of thing. So,
yeah, and people are going to leave. The drummer's too loud.
Oh God, he's doing it.
So playing quiet
dynamic.
And being able to play quietly is very important. And when I was younger, my whole thing was like, I wanted to be the loudest drummer in town. Like, that was my thing, so I had to change that mindset, and in some ways I'm still working on changing that mindset. But playing quietly is beautiful, and it's an essential part of anyone's playing, being able to play quietly well.
Cool. Well, quickly, hasn't hit me yet. Of course, I think it's one of a lot of people's favorite song, one of Blue Rodeo songs. You do these little fills at the start, very tasty fills at the start, very, very cool. They're sort of signature stuff. You played them around live. I've checked them out. You sort of amuse yourself with playing a little bit differently, but
I don't. With Rodeo, it's never been a note. That's one of the beautiful things about this band is like we don't recreate. We do not recreate the records note for note. Every song is played a little differently every night. There's always an element of improvisation in that band. That's what keeps it fresh. That's what makes it a real band. That's what makes it a great band. That's one of the things that I think makes it a great band to me, and also that makes it a joy to play in. Because there are bands where it's like you are literally going to play everything note for note the same night, and there's some people that dig that. It's not my thing. My favorite, what makes, in spite of some of the difficulties I have had over the years in adapting to the rodeo thing, what makes it an ideal band for me is that element of improvisation, and that that is allowed and encouraged, and that's one of the things that makes that band home for me. That it can be a home for me in spite of the fact that I did not come from the world of Neil Young and Bob Dylan and I had to adapt to that world, but one thing I felt at home with right away is that and have always felt at home with is that you're playing in the moment in that band,
Mm.
and
Mhm.
that's where music really lives for me, and that's where the real joy of playing music comes from for me. So I've always loved that and appreciated that about Blue Rodeo.
Yeah, and that's what I was about to say because I remember a lot from that last time I saw you guys, and then I see live stuff on YouTube, and it's like, oh, look, that's a bit different there. That section goes a little longer, and I
Yeah,
think that's very interesting because that it keeps it, as you say, fresh. We'll go to a
yeah,
show, and you're like, oh, they might enjoy themselves here. The Diamond Mine
right,
jam could last 11 minutes. Who knows?
right, yeah.
Uh, it's interesting. Very cool.
Yeah,
Um,
it
quick.
is. Yeah, I mean, even if you were to see us play exactly the same set
Hmm.
um, from one night to the next, it'll be a little different each night.
Cool. Quickly, talk to me about recording. How does it work with Blue Rodeo for a recording? So you guys have, Greg and Jim have songs, and then and is it all like recorded live together? Is it sort of, is a lot of process? Is there a discussion? We want this, we want that. How does it work for you for recording a
It's
rodeo
it's
album?
been it's been a little different every record. For instance, the last record, which was made, you know, basically in the middle of the pandemic.
The
uh,
yeah the Many a Mile record, if I'm correct.
Many a Mile. That
Yeah.
record was done quite separately because of the
Okay.
pandemic. So,
Mhm.
so Jim's songs were recorded, excuse me, in Toronto at Blue Rodeo's Woodshed studio. But Greg lives outside of Toronto. He lives about an hour and a half outside of Toronto, near Peterborough, and so he demoed his songs and recorded his songs. I think he demoed his songs at his home studio, or he might have done some of them at Jimmy Boskill's studio in Coburg. Jimmy Boskill is our sort of jack of all trades
The
player.
pedal steel player, I think. Yeah.
He plays pedal steel, mandolin,
Yeah. Right.
guitar, violin. Jimmy can
Mm.
play anything. Jimmy's one of the most incredible musicians I've ever met. And
One of
he's also
those.
yeah, he's one of those, man. He's absolutely one of those. He's
Yeah.
Jimmy's amazing, and he's
Cool.
also a really good engineer, and he has this wonderful studio in Coburg
Mm.
uh, that he opened a couple of years ago, and so that's where Greg sort of demoed his stuff at Jimmy's studio with Peterborough musicians, and then sent us the demos, going, "Here's the tunes," and so come and record your parts. And so basically that's what I went to Coburg and one afternoon, and I charted out Greg's 7 songs that he had for the record, and cut all those. And I think I arrived at noon and I left at 7 p.m. and that was, my
Wow.
Greg songs were done. And then I
Okay.
went, and then with Jim's songs, Jim had 5 songs in that he recorded at the Woodshed for the record, and he also
Okay.
demoed them at the Woodshed he had a drum machine. Greg had a buddy, a great musician from Peterborough named Ian McEwen, who played the bass parts and the drum parts for his
Okay.
demos,
Okay.
and then Basil and I replaced those. But for Jim, he just had a drum machine, and he recorded with Colin Cripps. He recorded his songs, made demos for them, and sent them to me, and I did the same thing. I charted those 5 songs. I went to the Woodshed in Toronto and recorded those in an afternoon. So it was
Okay.
like, for the last record was the quickest I've ever worked on a Blue Rodeo record. I spent a total of like 12 hours recording
Right. Oh my
my
goodness.
my
Okay. That's
parts.
pretty quick. Okay.
But normally, what we do is we're all together, and sometimes we'll do pre-production. Like, we'll all be in a room, and Jim's will go, "I got this song," or Greg will go, "I got this song," and we'll arrange it together.
Oh,
Usually,
nice.
Jim is the play what you feel guy. So he'll be like, "Play what you feel," or he'll sometimes have an idea. Like, I want brushes on this song, and
Mhm.
on the snare or something, or he'll be play what you feel. Greg always has specific ideas for everybody. He always hears the whole arrangement,
Interesting.
um,
Okay.
yeah, ahead of time, and so he'll be
Okay.
like, I just want you to, I want really dead sounding drums. I want no fills. I want, I want this groove, like, or I want lots of fills, but, in this part here, I want you to do a fill here and a fill here, so the two of them are kind of opposites that way. And
Okay.
sometimes there's pre-production and then we'll go and record, which was the case with our second to last record, what is that called? 1,000 Arms. But then, say the record before that, In Our Nature, which we did at Greg's house, that was like Jim sits down, says, "Here's a song." We all listen to it, then we all go to our instruments and play it, and then we hit record. And so that was done. That was done much more sort of on the spot. So we've done it all. We do it all kinds of different ways. I would say my favorite is on the spot. Yeah, my favorite is when it's just like when we sit down, somebody goes, "Here's a song," maybe if it's Greg, he goes, "I want you to do this and this and this," and then we go do it, and it's like fresh. It's really fresh and exciting and new, and often you get something very special when you're playing a song for the first time, and it's still this fresh new thing. So I'd say that is my favorite recording experience of the various approaches.
Would you say there's more emotion involved into it? There's less thinking about it and just more reacting to the song.
Exactly. Less thinking. You got no time to. It's often once you start thinking, and you start solidifying your parts, sometimes you lose a little magic, and sometimes there's real magic that happens, like the first or second time you played a song when you don't fully know it, when you haven't fully mapped out all the parts and things in your mind, and you're still trying things and maybe doing something you wouldn't do when you played the song for the 12th time. And and sometimes that's when the really special stuff happens.
Cool. There's a spontaneity to it, if you will.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Talk to me about touring. You were talking about having, I think, 2 kits for touring across Canada.
Yeah.
There's one in the east and one in the west. How does that work for you? Is it not an expense, but more? It's easier for you to do it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. This it's just a logistical necessity. It's because with Rodeo, I actually have 3 kits. I have a mini kit that we use if occasionally we'll do acoustic sets. Sometimes we might, in the live show, we might decide to do an acoustic set as part of the show, or sometimes we do like little TV specials and things like that where we're all playing together, and we have to play very quietly because of Greg, and so I'll play the mini kit, which is like a 18-inch kick drum, 10-inch rack tom, 13-inch floor tom, and very muted, and I'll play that with brushes. And then we have our A and B rigs, and so everybody in the band has 2 sets of amps. I have 2 drum kits. There'll be 2 pedal steels, 2 sets of keyboards, and that sort of thing. Because sometimes it happens, especially in the summertime, when we're doing one-offs at festivals, where we might be playing in Halifax one week and Victoria the next week. So you have to send 1 set of gear to Halifax and 1 set of gear to Victoria. So yeah, that's what we do. And and I have an endorsement with Yamaha, so which I'm very lucky to have. So I have a couple of beautiful Yamaha kits that I use with Rodeo. One is an absolute maple hybrid kit. That's my main kit now. It's a champagne sparkle kit. I love that kit. And then I also have they're great. And then I also have a Blue Swirl Club custom kit. That's kind of my B kit now. It's actually the exact same kit you saw me play with Future Now, except all the sizes are smaller. Instead of 22, 13, 16, it's 20, 12, 14. because I'm not allowed to have a 22-inch kick drum and a 16-inch floor tom at Blue Rodeo, because it's too much low end, and Greg is like, it's too much low end. You get to play your smaller drums. So
I think I'm beginning. I think I'm beginning to see the picture why you're having so much fun last Friday.
Oh yeah,
I think it was the animal in you coming out and going, I just need to get this out of me.
Well, that's the nice thing about playing in lots of different bands is because I get to cut loose. And yes, I get to play really loud, but I wouldn't be happy if I was only in a thing where it was just loud all the time. I need to play quiet music too. So just there was a period, I would say in the 90s, where the early to mid 90s, where I was so busy with Blue Rodeo that I barely played with other people, and I mean this is no slight to Blue Rodeo, but I think my playing suffered a bit for it, because I was just playing the same 30 songs and for years, and I just realized that I'd gotten it made me a bit lazy and complacent in my playing, and there started to be gaps in my schedule, and I started playing with other people, and I realized how important it was for me as a musician to play with as many people as possible, just to keep what I'm doing alive and keep it fresh,
Well, moving on, exactly. That was one of my questions, because you seem to have a lot of collaborations with a lot of different people. Ian Thorney, Big Sugar, Barney Bentall, Change of Heart, Andrew Cash, as you said. It goes on and on and on. Is that the idea to keep busy, to keep playing with other people besides Blue Rodeo? Because I would think some people will think, well, he's in Blue Rodeo. Why does he need to go out and play with these other people? He could just play a show, go home, and just chillax, and everything's fine. Right. But I think you're sort of pointing as to why you're doing that.
Well, there are a couple of reasons. Like one of them is just artistically. As a drummer, to try and keep. I always want to be a better drummer. I think in the early 80s, early 90s, or mid 90s, I think part of me was a bit lazy. I was so busy with Rodeo, and part of me was a bit lazy. Like, I don't need to practice. I can do everything I got to do with Blue Rodeo, and I think there was a part of me that got a little lazy. And then I started to realize, I think I had listened. I was doing some reunion gigs with one of the bands, or a couple of bands that I'd played with in the late 80s, and listening to the material, the pre-Blue Rodeo stuff I was doing, I was like, that stuff's really challenging, and I don't really play like that anymore, And then I sort of realized, like, I kind of maybe have let things slide a little, and so I think that's when I realized that I need to keep practicing, that I need to keep playing with different types of people and challenge myself, if I wanted to keep improving as a musician. So some of it is just wanting to get better, and wanting to get better, and not suck as a drummer, because your chops can slide without noticing, especially if you're just playing in one or two bands, but and then the other thing, just creatively and artistically, it's more satisfying for me to play with lots of people. But the other thing is that about 6 years ago, we did a tour, and at the end of the tour, Greg was kind of physically and mentally exhausted, and he said, like, I cannot do this schedule anymore. I can't go out for a month anymore. And so our schedule suddenly became drastically reduced, and I had all this time to fill. And it also made me think, like, maybe we're getting near the end of Blue Rodeo, and so I need to think about being out there as a available drummer, because I don't really do anything. I don't have a plan B. This is it. This is what I do. Like, I'm not like, okay, cool. If the drumming thing doesn't work out, I'll give my accounting skills will bail me out. It's like, I don't have any accounting. I'm good at music, and that's it. So I was like, I better get my ass out there and start playing with people, and so I just started saying yes to everything, because if you want to gig with a lot of people, the first thing you got to do is just be out there and be seen, so people, oh,
Right.
he's available. Oh, look, he's playing with Joe Schmo. Like, I wonder if he's available to play with us. And so that started happening. And so some of it was just like survival. Like, oh man, Blue Rodeo might be winding down. I better, get out there and get sessions and gigs and let people know that I'm available. So I did that. And sure enough, work started coming in, and I started playing with people like Tara Lightfoot, who I love, and who's an amazing songwriter and great to play with. And so I've just been working with a number of people, especially over the last 6 years since that happened. And happily, since that time, Greg has kind of bounced back and is in a better place, and the band has started working more. And we actually went on the road for a full month last November and December, which was thrilling. So it's great, yeah. So Blue Rodeo is working again more. We'll never be back up to 90 or 120 shows like we were back in the day every year. Right. But we're working more, and I'm engaged with all these other bands. So I'm real busy right now, and I'm very grateful for it.
Well, it's inspirational because I was there. Turbo House is nice, but it's small, And I'm thinking, man, he's gonna play like my hometown in this big hall in a couple of weeks, and here he is in this small little, grubby little, club playing with this metal band where pedals are breaking and stuff is not working as it should. You know what I mean?
There's no crew to help you.
There's no crew to help him, and he has to run to get the pedal, and he's doing it all by himself. And I'm like, wow, that's a humbling thing right there. Because I'd be like, you know what, man, why am I doing this? I could just be at home. And it's inspirational because you go, you know what, man, it's never given. A, it's never given, and B, it's not because you're in a certain band that that's it, and end of story. You keep pushing and keep doing, and that's why I was blown away by that last Friday. And I was like, you know what, man, that's pretty cool that he's keeping the juices flowing, keeping going, whatever the situation. No small club is too oh no, I won't go there. And it was
I'll play any hole in the wall, honestly. I'll play your basement. You got a gig in your basement? I'll play your basement.
I have 2 drum sets. Get a guitar player.
I mean, I'm one of those people, and I think most professional musicians are. Like, we do this for free. Like, don't tell anyone. Oh no, I just told it, but I'd probably do it for free if I could. Yeah. I can't because I don't have another way of making a living. But so there's that, and also one of the nice things about being Blue Rodeo is that Blue Rodeo's success has largely been contained to Canada. So when I joined Blue Rodeo, like, we'd go and we'd play an arena or play a big hall somewhere, and I'd be like, whoa, look at me, I'm a big deal now, I'm playing Massey Hall. And then you go down to the States and you go somewhere in Alabama and play some hole in the wall for 20 people, and you go like, this is humbling. Like, nobody, and so we were always constantly being humbled. Like, we would never, like, Blue Rodeo has never had the chance to fully sort of go like, we are, such a big deal, like, there's always been this other side of the coin that's been humbling, and I and that's just been the case in every band I've been in. So so I've never sort of had that illusion of like, I'm too big for this. What am I doing here? I've never had that feeling. Yeah. And I don't believe in that feeling. Like, I don't if you get to the point where you're in a van and you're like, I physically cannot do this anymore, that I understand. But that's another thing is I'm almost 60. I try to keep myself in shape because I want to keep doing this, because I still like getting in a like cramped van filled with gear and driving for 5 hours to Montreal and talking shit with the rest of the band. I still love that, and part of me is like, you're almost 60. Should you still like this? Maybe you should be more mature, but it's a beautiful experience, and you're still bringing music to people. And I still like that. I'm gonna keep doing it as long as I can. You know.
Yeah, and just reading the comments and just seeing the people just rock out last Friday, and just
Hmm.
reading the comments, all the Blue Rodeo stuff I was listening to in the past weeks. You know, this song was at my dad's funeral. We got married to this
Right.
song, or this was my
Hmm.
childhood as a kid. You know, all the stuff that, I mean, it brings just a joy that's just, there's no price to it, basically. So, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. For me, it's like if I can make 10 or 20 people in a club happy, that's a great thing. And I don't think it's any less important than making 2,000 people in a hall happy. It's great if you
Mhm.
can do 2,000 people at once, but if you can reach, like if I play a gig and one person says like, that was awesome. I feel so, I really enjoyed that. I feel so glad I came. I feel so much better than I
Mhm.
did before I came. That makes it worth it. That, just
Mhm.
even if one person feels that way, then it's worthwhile.
Cool. I'll just say amen to that.
All right.
I quickly, last 5 minutes. It's already been an hour. It's been fascinating. Thank you so much, Glenn.
Thank you.
So also you also, that's something I want to talk about. You also sort of did your own stuff with the Swallows.
Hmm. Hmm.
So you did 4 albums. You were singer songwriter. Talk to me
Hmm.
about going to that side of making music, and that process of having the confidence to do all that stuff, and how did it what did it bring to you, basically doing all that stuff?
Well, I've always loved writing songs since I was a teenager. Um, I, even though it's still one of my favorite feelings of finishing a song. And
Hmm.
so, I'd written songs for years, and I think at one point in the mid '90s, I felt like I think I have enough songs that I could record a record of my own. And so I recorded the first Swallows record, Turning Blue, where I played most of the instruments on that. I had a few guest artists, one of whom was Ian Blurton, who played a guitar solo on it, but mostly that's me playing all the instruments. And I think it was just a side of myself that I wanted to express. And then I formed a band, and that record was well received critically, and I think I managed to get rid of you know about 1,500 CDs or something when that was still possible.
That's about possible, yes.
Yeah. So that was, so I think I kind of broke even, and one of the
Right, right.
songs ended up on a soundtrack to a movie. So that gave me the call. Oh, I can keep doing this, and so I formed a band and did some live shows, mostly in Toronto. I didn't do a lot of traveling.
Okay.
But as far, but I second guessed myself a lot. I didn't have a lot of confidence as a singer. I feel more confident as a singer now and
Okay.
than I did then. Um, uh, but it was, yeah, that was a really satisfying venture, and it was something I had to shut down around when I recorded the fourth Swallows record and put that out. Was in 2011, and that was also when my fourth child was born, my son Marlon.
Okay. Okay.
And I think at that time, everybody in the band was a professional musician, and just organizing things like rehearsals with everybody's schedule. I remember to organize one rehearsal took 35 emails, and I had this newborn. I had a
Right, right.
newborn, and I had a teenage daughter, and I had
Mm.
also had a 2.5-year old, and I can't remember. So I have 4 kids. My eldest son is now 37. I can't
Oh,
remember if he was still living with me then.
okay.
But but my life was. I just didn't. I just thought I don't have time to have to do 35 emails to organize a
Right,
rehearsal.
right,
So
right,
I had to.
right.
I basically had to say, okay, bye bye Swallows. That's the end of that.
Yeah.
I've still kept writing since then. I actually released a solo acoustic record a few years ago called Act. No, what is it called? It's called Fates Conspire, and it's under my
Okay.
name, Glenn Milchem, and that's out there.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I'm still writing songs. I think I'm considering doing another solo recording, but
Okay. I was wondering. Yeah.
but yeah. But the Swallows was like a 10-year project that meant a lot to me, and that music's still out there on all the streaming platforms. But yeah, it was. I don't know if I'll ever lead my own band again because it's a crazy amount of work, and
Mm.
I really like being a side person where someone just says like be you're being picked up at 10:30, and I'm like, cool.
Then we got some coffee.
Yeah. Who's getting? Yeah, bring me a coffee. I do like the simplicity of that. So.
No, indeed. Okay. It's been a fascinating talk. I don't know what else to talk about. There's been so much. Very quickly, it's been 40 years. You've been drumming. You've been pretty much all over Canada, States, all over the place. Favorite concert, favorite moment in your 40-year career? I know that's a lot.
That is a tough one.
Any of the awards with Blue Rodeo that are something important, or like a special moment?
No, the awards I don't care about. The awards are nice, but it's not. They're actually. I sort of unintentionally have them displayed behind. Awards don't matter to me. But here they are. But the gigs. I'd say probably some of my most memorable gigs were with Rodeo. There was one gig that immediately springs to mind. Was a Massey Hall gig about 6 years ago that we did, and the Sadies opened for us, and cool. Gord Downey was there. Gord Downey, the Tragically Hip, and this was just a few months before he passed.
Okay.
He'd been diagnosed with his brain tumor. I think he'd already done like the Hip had already done their farewell shows.
Okay.
And he was friends with the Stadies because they'd done recordings with him, and he'd come to our show. Gordon Lightfoot was also at that show, and Gordon Pinsent. So Gordon Pinsent, the actor Gordon Pinsent, who recently passed. So we call that night the night of the three Gords, when Gord Downey, Gordon Pinsent, and Gordon Lightfoot were all side stage.
Nice.
And when we did Lost Together, as our last song, which we always did. And when we do Lost Together, the opening act usually comes out on stage with us and sings the song with us. And Travis Good of the Sadies brought Gord Downey on stage. And Gord was like, no. Because at that time, his brain cancer was advanced enough that he couldn't even remember like the chorus to Lost Together.
Okay.
Then Travis was kind of going like, you can do this. So he brought him out on stage. And so Gord was on stage, he was introduced, huge roar from the crowd, like
right.
And Gord came on stage, and I can't remember if he sang on the choruses or not, but there's a breakdown when we do it live. There's a breakdown where it just breaks down to piano, and at that moment, he decided to do a vocal improvisation.
This difficult Gord stuff, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and so he just took the mic and did like this vocal improv solo, that like this wordless improv where he just kind of sang an improvised melody over the piano thing, and it was really special. And there's a video of it online that my wife took. You look it up, Gord Downey, Blue Rodeo, Lost Together. Massey Hall, maybe you'll find it. It's really special and touching. And that was the last time that Gord Downey set foot on a stage. And it was really beautiful. Like it was just, just the feeling of not just him being there, but of the whole audience going, wow. Like there was such an incredible feeling in the room. That I'd say that maybe that's the first one that comes to mind as a favorite.
That's a very beautiful moment. Yeah, that is a very beautiful moment. Thank you for sharing, Glenn. Thank you so much. That's pretty cool. I will check that out.
Yeah, if you can find it, it's quite special.
Very nice. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for everything. We didn't succeed. We've gone past the hour.
I knew it was gonna happen. I told you. I babble, and I babble.
It's all good. It's all interesting. Thank you so much again for everything. Thank you for the show last Friday. And what's up next? Shows with Rodeo. More songwriting
tomorrow night. Actually tonight I'm playing at Grossman's in Toronto with Action Sound Band, which is a blues band I play in with Eric Schenkman, who is the guitarist from the Spin Doctors. And if you know the
Oh,
Spin
wow.
Doctors, they had a big hit in the early '90s with that song "Two Princes," and
Indeed, I was a
so
fan.
they're
I was a fan.
yeah, they're still around. But Eric happens to be a Toronto guy, lives in Toronto, though they do much of their playing in the States. And when he's in town, he plays every Wednesday at Grossman's, and I play with him and a wonderful bass player named Leo Valvasori, who's also a veteran of many bands like Alana Miles and Martha and the
Hmm.
Muffins, and played with Ronnie
Oh,
Hawkins for many years. So
you're naming all my
there's a couple of
favorites.
legends I'm playing with tonight, and then Friday and Saturday I'm playing with Ian Blurton's Future Now in London at the Palisade Sociable and the Casbah in Hamilton, and then on the 31st I'm playing in
My,
Ottawa with Blue Rodeo.
in my
So that's what's
hometown.
coming up
So
in the next week or so. Yeah.
yeah, I'll be definitely checking that show. It's been 20 years since last time I saw you at Blue
Oh,
Rodeo, so I'll
great.
be definitely
Well,
checking that
that's
show.
great to know that you'll be there.
Yeah.
Right on.
Thanks so much, Glenn, again, and well, all the best to you. And
Thank you.
I hope to cross paths if you come back to Montreal. Definitely check out your shows again. And thanks so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me, Denis. I appreciate it.
No problem. Have a good evening. Take
Thanks,
care.
you too. Bye.
So there you go. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thank you so much to Glenn for coming to the show. And I bid you a good last episode for me on this 7th season. Thank you so much for being here throughout the entire season. Have a great summer and hope to see you again next season in autumn. Until then, all the best and see you again. Ciao.